There is a fascinating surprise waiting inside this otherwise ordinary-looking building. Visitors to Morganton's Performing Arts Center are astonished when they first walk in because its entrance area and gallery is home to a huge fresco. Stunning images dance across the ceiling in glorious array, depicting the 9 muses of art and literature, as well as other classical images. This is true fresco, an art form that flowered during the Renaissance but dates to antiquity and may have much in common with cave painting techniques from 18,000 years ago. True fresco is living art. The images have unusual depth and power. They are not on the surface, but have become one with the lime plaster, chemically sealed within a durable layer of calcium carbonate, which imparts to the fresco the unusual brilliance, depth, and vibrancy for which it is known, a technique that charges the work with what appears to be an interior light. Planning for the Muses project began in 2003 and was largely completed by renowned North Carolina fresco artist Ben Long and his team in April of 2004. This internationally acclaimed artist lives and works from a studio in Asheville, where he also founded the Fine Arts League of Asheville, established to preserve and develop the artistic traditions of classical realism in which Long was schooled, and which forms the stylistic foundation for his work today.
But do take time to just pay attention to these, both the bones and the muscles of this figure.
One of the foundations of fresco is learning to draw.
And then when the model starts posing, you'll be warmed up.
After the idea takes form in the artist's mind, sketches of the figures that will populate the fresco are created. The drawings are referred to as cartoons, and they're not freestyle representations, as the term might suggest, but accurate renderings from life. This cartoon is being drawn as part of a fresco demonstration process.
I think there are different reasons for casting the subject you want. For instance, having to do biblical scenes, it's hard to find a 2,000-year-old looking character when you don't really know what they look like. I think then more it's a feeling of what the idea is supposed to portray, and then you're trying to find something that keeps it human. And you're trying to capture that.
When the sketch is complete, a tracing is made.
In the old days, they didn't care that much about the drawing itself. They would punch holes in the drawing. But if you want to save the drawing, you trace it.
And then pinholes are punched along the trace lines, the first step in a process called pouncing. The pouncing transfers the pigment to the lime skin on the surface, a wall or a ceiling. The lime itself has been carefully prepared and aged as long as a year before being applied in ever thinner layers for our demonstration to an old piece of Italian tile. The wet plaster allows a day's worth of painting time, more or less, before the lime loses its ability to absorb the pigment, so every minute counts. The paints used in fresco are ground earth pigments mixed with pure water.
I tried to keep the colors pretty simple, and they are basically the earth colors of old.
Each color is prepared in a single batch specifically for the fresco, a word which means fresh in Italian, so that the color applied today will match that applied tomorrow. But nobody said it would be easy, and mastering fresco requires a lengthy learning curve, not to mention some frustration along the way.
You can work all day long and then use the wrong color, and it'll change everything. And so there is a lot of hit and miss learning. You have to screw up quite a few frescoes, and then you learn how to do it. I think people are generally drawn to interesting characters. And part of the whole reason of doing anything with art is that it has to do with life. There's a human element in doing things from life you certainly can't get if somebody's already presented you with a fixed image. You know, when you think you've achieved what you're after visually, you stop, or you just get fed up with it. Is that going to be enough?
Sometimes fresco artists return to their creations later to touch things up. The technique is called fresco secco.
In retouch, you never paint, because what you're doing is using very transparent colors to, the best you can, marry one day with the other. And it needs to stay transparent, because the whole effect of fresco is the fact that you want the colors to be influenced by the lime, in which the initial true fresco colors are embedded. The only reason you do any kind of retouch is to harmonize the whole painting.
Long painted his first North Carolina fresco during the summer of 1974 at St. Mary's of the Hills Episcopal Church in West Jefferson.
When I first started studying with the man I studied with, his name is Antigone, almost one of the very first days, we went out to this church where he was to do a fresco. And when you walk in and you see this huge wall, big empty wall, and you get to cover it with figures and paintings and color, and the imagination just is unleashed on something like that. It's very exciting. And it does have an effect on the people who come into that particular room. Wonderful pictures change and stimulate the attitude of just about anybody who walks in and sees them. So it's a very effective art form.
Back in Morganton, the muses continue their beguiling dance across the ceiling. As a cast of characters, friends of the artist, observes from the sidelines, including Long's Italian mentor and teacher waving in the background, plus the artist himself sitting on the steps and appearing a bit tired. When the rest of the world learns about Ben Long's North Carolina frescoes, people from just about everywhere are certain to find their way to this unassuming performing arts center in the Blue Ridge foothills, where they too will become mesmerized by Morganton's muses and the art of true fresco.